The evening felt like honey poured slowly across the world. Golden light rested on the porch railing. Soft. Warm. Patient. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and sun-warmed wood. Wind chimes moved at a slow rhythm above the doorway. Inside the kitchen, Emma stood by the sink, drying her hands on a towel. The faucet had just been turned off. Silence returned to the house, except for the soft sound of paws against grass. She glanced out the screen door. Max. Her puppy. Small. Golden. Slightly clumsy in the way only young dogs can be. His ears were still too big for his head. His paws too wide for his legs. He had only been part of her life for 3 months. But already, the house felt built around him. Max, she called gently. It's time to come inside, buddy. Usually, that was all it took. He would spin around immediately, tail wagging so hard his whole body swayed. He would race toward the porch, nails tapping against the wood. Half excitement. Half chaos. But tonight, he didn't move. Emma smiled at first. Maybe he hadn't heard her. Max, she called again, lighter this time. The puppy stood near the edge of the yard, just before the tall oak tree. Still. Very still. His tail had stopped wagging. Not talked. Not afraid. Just quiet. Focused. The golden light wrapped around him like a halo. The breeze brushed gently through his fur. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking behind him. Emma leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "What are you doing out there?" she murmured, almost laughing. Max took one small step backward. Slowly. Deliberately. But not toward her. He stepped back while keeping his eyes fixed on something behind him. As if he were making space. As if he were guiding. Emma felt the smallest shift in her chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't worry. It was curiosity. She pushed open the screen door. The hinge gave a soft creak. "Come on, Max," she said more softly now. "It's getting cool." The puppy flicked one ear at the sound of her voice. He knew she was there. He always knew. But he didn't run. He didn't bound forward. Instead, he turned his head slightly toward her. Just enough to check that she was watching. Then he looked back again. Waiting. Emma stepped onto the porch. The wood felt warm beneath her bare feet. The world seemed unusually quiet. Even the wind chimes had stilled. She squinted toward the fading light. "What do you see?" she whispered. Max shifted again. One careful step. Then another. Still facing forward. Still watching something she couldn't yet see. His posture was intense. It was purposeful. There was a calm determination in the way he stood. A quiet insistence. Emma felt a strange pull to follow. She descended the porch steps slowly. Grass brushed against her ankles as she walked. "Max, you're being weird tonight," she said softly. The puppy glanced back at her. And in that glance, there was something different. Not mischief. Not playfulness. Connection. Like he was asking her to trust him. He moved forward just a little. Then stopped. Waiting again. Emma's heartbeat slowed instead of quickened. The air felt thicker somehow. Not heavy. Just meaningful. She stepped closer. Now she stood only a few yards away from him. The sunlight was thinning. Shadows stretched longer across the lawn. And that's when she noticed it. Movement. Subtle. Small. Behind him. Something no bigger than a loaf of bread. Low to the ground. Still. Emma's breath caught, not in fear. In surprise. She leaned forward, trying to focus. The small shape shifted again. Hesitant. Max didn't move. He stood like a quiet shield. Like a bridge between two worlds. "Oh," Emma whispered. The tiny figure took one uncertain step. Then paused. Max took one step backward in response. Slowly. Encouraging. Not forcing. Emma felt her hand rise to her mouth. Her voice came out as barely more than air. "Max." The puppy's tail gave the faintest movement. Not a wag. A reassurance. The world seemed to hold its breath. Emma stepped closer again. And then she finally saw it clearly. A small, trembling shape. Soft fur. Wide eyes. Following him. She gasped. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood. Max hadn't refused to come inside. He had refused to leave something behind. Her heart swelled in her chest. The puppy glanced back at her once more. And in his eyes, there was no confusion. No mischief. Only quiet purpose. What the dog sensed would change everything. The small shape behind Max didn't move at first. It simply stood there, half hidden in the soft evening shadow. Emma took another slow step forward. Grass bent beneath her feet. The air felt cooler now. "Max," she whispered. The puppy turned his head slightly toward her. Not fully. Just enough to check that she was still there. Then he looked back again. Focused. The tiny figure shifted. A hesitant step. Then another. Emma's eyes adjusted to the dimming light. And that's when she saw it clearly. A kitten. Small. Dusty gray. Fur slightly matted, but not hurt. Its eyes were wide. Not scared. Just unsure. "Oh my goodness," Emma breathed. Max didn't bark. He didn't bounce. He didn't rush toward it. He simply stood between the kitten and the open yard. Like a quiet guardian. The kitten took another tiny step. Stopping just behind Max's back legs. Almost touching him. Emma felt something warm spread through her chest. "Is that why you wouldn't come inside?" she murmured. Max's tail moved slowly now. A gentle side-to-side motion. Not playful. Reassuring. The kitten blinked. Then looked at Emma. Then at Max. As if asking him what to do next. Max took one careful step toward the porch. Then paused. He looked back at the kitten. Waiting. The kitten followed. One slow step. Then another. Emma covered her mouth softly. "He was guiding you," she whispered. The realization settled in her heart. He hadn't been disobedient. He had been patient. She crouched down slightly, lowering herself to their level. "It's okay," she said gently. Her voice softened into the evening air. The kitten hesitated. Its tiny body trembled just a little from the cooling breeze. Max noticed. He shifted closer to it. Not touching. Just near enough to share warmth. Emma felt tears sting unexpectedly behind her eyes. "You sweet boy," she whispered to Max. The puppy glanced at her again. His eyes were steady. Certain. He wasn't asking for praise. He was asking for permission. Emma slowly extended her hand toward the kitten. "It's okay, little one," she said quietly. The kitten didn't run. It didn't retreat. It simply stayed behind Max, trusting him more than her. Max stepped back again. Carefully, gently, encouraging the kitten forward. Emma noticed something beautiful. Every time the kitten paused, Max paused. Every time the kitten stepped, Max stepped. He was matching its rhythm, adapting to it, guiding without pushing. The golden light was almost gone now. Soft blue tones replaced the warmth of sunset. The porch light flicked on automatically behind her, a warm glow spilling across the yard. The kitten blinked at the light. Max stood tall, protective, but calm. Emma exhaled slowly. She realized something in that moment. This wasn't random. Max had found the kitten somewhere beyond the fence line. He could have run home. He could have left it. But he didn't. He stayed. And when she called him, he refused. Because leaving wasn't an option for him. Emma felt her heart shift. Not just toward the kitten, but toward Max. She had adopted him thinking she was rescuing him. But right now, it felt like he was teaching her something instead. "Okay," she whispered. "We're not leaving anyone behind tonight." Max's ears lifted slightly at her words. The kitten looked between them again. Emma slowly stepped backward toward the porch. "Come on," she said softly. Max took one step, then paused for the kitten. The kitten followed. They moved together. Slow, careful, connected. Emma walked ahead this time, opening space for them. The porch light wrapped around the three of them like a blanket. When they reached the bottom step, the kitten stopped. The height looked enormous to it. Max noticed immediately. He stepped up onto the first step, then turned, waiting. The kitten looked up at him, then at the step. Emma knelt down again. "You can do it," she whispered. The kitten lifted one tiny paw, placed it on the wood, slipped slightly. Max moved closer, close enough that the kitten leaned against him, and tried again. This time it climbed up, one shaky step at a time. Emma felt a tear escape down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She just watched. Max climbed the rest of the steps slowly, checking after each one. The kitten followed. When they reached the porch, the kitten stopped beside him. Safe. Under the warm porch light. Emma crouched fully now, her voice barely more than a breath. "You brought her home." Max's tail wagged once. Soft. Satisfied. The kitten finally looked directly at Emma, its tiny chest rising and falling. Emma extended her hand again. This time, the kitten stepped forward. Just a little. Enough to sniff her fingers. Max stood beside it. Still. Certain. Connected. Emma looked at her puppy differently now. Not just as playful. Not just as sweet. But as something deeper. A quiet guide. A gentle protector. Someone who understood that love sometimes means refusing to walk away. She swallowed softly. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go inside." Max stepped toward the open door, then stopped, turning to make sure the kitten was following. The kitten hesitated only a second this time, then crossed the threshold. Together. Emma closed the door gently behind them, and in the warm glow of the kitchen light, she realized this was only the beginning. The house felt different the moment the door closed. Quieter. Fuller. Emma stood still for a second, just listening. the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the kitchen clock. And beneath it, two tiny sets of breaths. Max stepped forward first. Slow. Measured. He walked into the kitchen like he had done something important, and wanted her to see it. The kitten remained just inside the doorway. Small. Still. Taking in the new space. "It's okay," Emma whispered gently. She lowered herself to sit on the cool kitchen floor. Not reaching. Not rushing. Just waiting. Max looked between them. Then did something simple. He walked back to the kitten, sat beside it, and leaned slightly in its direction. Not pressing. Not overwhelming. Just close enough to say, "You're not alone." Emma felt her throat tighten. "You're unbelievable," she murmured. The kitten blinked slowly. Its body was still tense, but not frightened. Just unsure. The overhead kitchen light felt too bright. Emma reached up and turned it off. The room softened immediately. Only the warm lamp near the dining table remained on. Golden light. Gentle shadows. Better. Max lowered himself onto the floor. Front paws stretched forward. Head lifted. Alert, but relaxed. The kitten moved 1 inch closer to him. Then another. Emma didn't speak. She knew silence mattered here. After a few seconds, the kitten brushed lightly against Max's shoulder. Testing. Max didn't react. He simply stayed steady. Solid. Reliable. Emma exhaled slowly. "Okay," she whispered again. "I think we can do this." She stood carefully and walked to the pantry. Each step slow so she wouldn't startle the kitten. She grabbed a small shallow bowl, then filled it with water. When she placed it on the floor, she slid it gently across the tile. Not toward the kitten, but near Max. The kitten noticed. It sniffed the air, then glanced at Max again. He blinked once. Slowly, the kitten stepped forward, lowered its tiny head, and drank. Emma pressed her hand against her chest. The smallest things can feel enormous in the right moment. Max shifted slightly, watching over the kitten as it drank. Not possessive. Not impatient. Just present. When the kitten finished, it lifted its head and looked around again. Its body still looked fragile. Thin. Emma noticed the way its ribs showed faintly under its fur. "You've been out there alone," she whispered softly. Max looked at her, then back at the kitten, as if confirming what she already knew. Emma walked toward the hallway. "Let me grab something warm." Max stayed put. He didn't follow her like he usually did. He didn't leave the kitten's side. That's when she understood something else. He wasn't just guiding. He was guarding. She returned with a folded blanket from the laundry room. Soft. Clean. Still carrying a faint scent of home. Emma knelt slowly and spread it across the floor. Not too close. Just close enough. "There," she said gently. The kitten hesitated. Max stood. Walked to the edge of the blanket. Turned in a small circle. Then lay down. Right in the center. Emma almost laughed through her tears. "You're making room," she whispered. The kitten watched him. Carefully. Then took a step onto the blanket. It paused again. Max remained still. Calm. Patient. The kitten curled down beside him. Not fully touching. Just near enough to feel warmth. Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The room felt warmer somehow. Softer. She sat cross-legged on the floor, watching them. "This wasn't random," she said quietly. Max glanced up at her. There was something thoughtful in his eyes. Something steady. She replayed the evening in her mind. How he had stood at the edge of the yard. How he refused to move. How he kept looking back. He hadn't been stubborn. He had been making a decision. A choice. And she had almost missed it. Emma swallowed gently. "Thank you," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. Max's tail tapped once against the blanket. The kitten shifted closer to him, resting its tiny head against his side. And for the first time, it closed its eyes. Not cautiously. Not halfway. Fully. Trusting. Emma felt the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't just about bringing something inside. It was about listening. About noticing. About choosing to trust what didn't make sense at first. She reached out slowly. Rested her hand on Max's back. His fur felt warm under her palm. Steady. Alive. "You knew," she whispered. Max blinked slowly. The kitten's breathing deepened. Even. Calm. Emma leaned back against the cabinet. The house no longer felt ordinary. It felt expanded. As if love had stretched the walls just a little wider. Outside, the wind picked up softly. But inside, everything felt still. Max lowered his head onto the blanket, careful not to disturb the kitten. Emma watched them for a long time. And somewhere deep in her heart, a quiet understanding began to form. This wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of something she hadn't expected. Something Max had sensed long before she did. And she knew. Tomorrow would bring questions. But tonight was about trust. The night settled gently around the house. Outside, crickets began their quiet rhythm. Inside, the lamp near the dining table cast a soft golden circle across the floor. Emma hadn't moved for several minutes. She simply watched. Max lay stretched across the blanket. The kitten curled against his side. Two small bodies, breathing in sync. The simplicity of it felt almost sacred. Emma reached for her phone slowly. Not to take a picture. Not yet. Just to check the time. 9:14 p.m. "It's late," she whispered. Max's ear twitched at the sound of her voice. But he didn't lift his head. The kitten stirred slightly, then settled again. Emma stood carefully. Her knees felt stiff from sitting on the tile. She moved toward the kitchen sink and poured herself a glass of water. Even the smallest sounds felt louder tonight. She turned the faucet off gently. No sudden movements. No sharp noises. When she turned back around, Max was watching her. His chin still rested on the blanket. But his eyes followed her. Alert. Not worried. Just aware. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." His gaze held hers for a second longer. Then he blinked. Slow. Trusting. Emma leaned against the counter. Something about his behavior kept replaying in her mind. He hadn't barked to get her attention. He hadn't pawed at the door. He hadn't panicked. He had simply waited. He had trusted that if she looked closely enough, she would understand. That kind of patience wasn't random. It was instinct. It was intuition. And maybe it was something even deeper. Emma walked quietly down the hallway and returned with a small cardboard box. She placed it near the blanket. Inside the box, she folded another soft towel. Just in case. Max lifted his head this time. He watched her prepare the space. His tail moved once against the blanket. Approval. You think she'll stay? Emma asked quietly. Max tilted his head slightly. The kitten stirred at the sound. Its tiny eyes opened halfway. It looked confused for a second. Then noticed Max still there. And relaxed again. Emma crouched beside them. You don't even know her, she whispered to Max. But you chose her. The words hung in the air. Chosen. That's what it felt like. Not random. Not coincidence. Max shifted carefully, adjusting his body so the kitten stayed warm. Emma noticed something subtle. Every time the kitten's breathing changed. Max's did too. He was aware of her in a way that went beyond curiosity. It was responsibility. Emma's chest tightened softly. You were outside longer than usual today, she said gently. You must have found her before I even noticed. She imagined it. Max near the fence line. Ears lifting. Hearing something small. Something fragile. Instead of running home, he stayed. And when she called, he refused. Not out of defiance, but out of devotion. Emma reached out and lightly touched the kitten's back with one finger. The fur felt thin. Warm. Alive. The kitten didn't flinch. It only shifted closer to Max. He responded instantly. A tiny adjustment. A protective curve of his body. Emma felt tears sting again. Not sadness. Just awe. You're not just a puppy, she murmured. You're something else. Max blinked slowly. The house creaked softly as the night air cooled the walls. Emma stood again. I should probably call someone tomorrow, she whispered. Maybe check if she belongs to someone. Max's ears moved at the word tomorrow. As if he understood time. As if he understood possibility. Emma walked to the front window and peeked outside. The yard looked peaceful. Still. Nothing unusual. Just the same familiar oak tree. The same fence. But everything felt different now. Because she knew something new had entered their world. When she returned to the blanket, the kitten had shifted again. This time, its small paw rested on Max's leg. Not by accident. Intentionally. Max didn't move. He simply accepted it. Emma let out a quiet laugh. She's already decided, she said softly. Max's tail tapped once. He knew. He had known from the beginning. Emma sat down beside them again. This time, she leaned her back against the wall. The lamp's warm glow wrapped around the three of them. Minutes passed. Slow. Gentle. The kitten's breathing deepened once more. Fully asleep. Max finally lowered his head again. But his eyes remained half open. Watching. Guarding. Emma studied his face. The softness of his expression. The calm steadiness. He wasn't restless. He wasn't excited. He was fulfilled. Like he had completed something important. And that realization settled deep inside her. Tonight wasn't about rescue. It wasn't about chance. It was about listening to the smallest signals. About paying attention when something feels different. Max had felt it first. She had only followed. Emma reached out and rested her hand lightly on his back again. You did good, she whispered. His eyes finally closed. Not fully asleep. But resting. The house felt warmer now. Not because of the heater. Not because of the lamp. But because something quiet and beautiful had been welcomed in. Emma exhaled slowly. Tomorrow would bring questions. But tonight was about presence. And she had a feeling. This small beginning was leading somewhere she hadn't yet imagined. Morning arrived softly. Not with noise. Not with urgency. But with pale sunlight stretching across the kitchen floor. Emma woke before her alarm. For a second, she didn't remember why. Then she heard it. 2 gentle breaths. Not 1. 2. She pushed herself up from the couch where she had fallen asleep sometime after midnight. The blanket was still on the floor. Max was still there. Curled slightly. Protective even in sleep. And beside him, the kitten. Tucked close. Tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Emma stood slowly, careful not to disturb them. Sunlight slipped through the window blinds in soft golden stripes. Dust particles floated lazily in the air. Peaceful. Still. Max's eyes opened first. Not startled. Just aware. He lifted his head. Looked at Emma. Then immediately checked the kitten. The kitten shifted slightly at the movement. Blinking into the light. It looked smaller in the morning. More fragile. But calmer. Good morning, Emma whispered. Max's tail tapped lightly against the blanket. The kitten yawned. A tiny, silent stretch. Emma smiled. You're both still here, she said softly. It felt almost like she had expected to wake up and find it was a dream. But it wasn't. Max stood carefully. Slow movements. He stepped off the blanket. Then turned back toward the kitten. Waiting. The kitten tried to stand. Its legs wobbled slightly. Max didn't rush. He just stayed near. Close enough to steady if needed. Emma knelt down. I think someone's hungry, she murmured. She walked toward the pantry. The usual morning routine felt different. Normally, Max would follow her. Tail wagging. Pacing near his food bowl. But today, he stayed with the kitten. Watching. Observing. Emma poured Max's food into his bowl. The familiar sound echoed gently. Max glanced toward it. Then back at the kitten. He didn't move. Emma noticed immediately. You can eat, she said softly. He remained still. She understood. He wasn't ignoring his food. He was prioritizing. Emma walked back to the blanket. The kitten was sniffing cautiously at the floor. Exploring its new world inch by inch. Okay, Emma whispered. Let's figure this out. She grabbed a small saucer from the cabinet. Poured a little warm milk into it. Not too much. Just enough. She placed it near the kitten. The kitten sniffed the air. Looked at Max. Max blinked once. Slowly. Permission. The kitten stepped forward. Lowered its tiny head. And began to drink. Emma felt relief wash over her. That's good, she whispered. Max finally walked to his own bowl. But he didn't dive into it like usual. He ate slowly. Checking back twice. Making sure the kitten was okay. Emma leaned against the counter. Her heart felt steady. Full. She noticed something else. The kitten wasn't trembling anymore. Its movements were still small. But more certain. The house no longer felt foreign to it. Max finished eating and returned immediately. He didn't need to be called. He lay down near the kitten again. Not as close as last night. Just nearby. Giving space. But staying connected. Emma crouched down beside them. We need to see if you belong to someone, she said gently. The kitten looked up at her. Curious. Max's ears lifted slightly. Emma reached for her phone. She snapped a simple photo. Nothing dramatic. Just the kitten on the blanket with Max beside it. Natural light. Honest. She posted it to the neighborhood group. Found near Oakwood Lane. Small gray kitten. Let me know if she belongs to anyone. She stared at the screen for a moment. Then set the phone down. Now they would wait. Max rested his chin on his paws. The kitten shuffled closer to him again. It seemed drawn to him like gravity. Emma watched them quietly. You picked her, she said softly to Max. He looked at her. And there it was again. That calm certainty. As if he already knew the outcome. The hours moved slowly. Late morning sunlight filled the kitchen. The kitten began exploring more confidently. It walked a small circle around Max. Sniffed the cabinet. Examined the leg of the dining table. Max followed with his eyes only. Never crowding. Never overwhelming. Just watching. When the kitten wandered a little too far toward the hallway, Max stood. Walked gently in front of it. Redirected it back toward the blanket. Emma smiled. You're serious about this, she said. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She turned quickly. One notification. Then another. Responses to the post. She picked it up. Her heart steady. The first reply was simple. Not mine, but she's adorable. The second. Check with the shelter. The third. No missing kitten reports in our area. Emma exhaled slowly. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding her breath. Max noticed the shift. He stood. Walked toward her. Sat at her feet. Looking up. Waiting. She knelt down beside him. I don't think she belongs to anyone, she said quietly. The words felt heavier than expected. Max's tail moved once. Then he glanced toward the kitten. The kitten was now attempting to climb onto the blanket again. Clumsy. Determined. Emma felt something settle in her chest. Not sudden. Not dramatic. But certain. She looked at Max. You already decided, didn't you? He blinked. Slow. Peaceful. And in that quiet kitchen, with sunlight wrapping around them, Emma realized something simple. Max hadn't just brought the kitten home. He had brought her a choice. And the morning light made the choice clearer than ever. The house felt quieter that afternoon. Not empty. Not uncertain. Just reflective. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her phone resting face down beside her. No one had claimed the kitten. No missing posts. No worried calls. Just silence. Across the room, the kitten explored the edge of the blanket again. A little braver now. A little steadier. Max followed at a distance. Never hovering. Never overwhelming. Just near enough to step in if needed. Emma watched them both. You really meant it, didn't you? She murmured. Max glanced toward her. Then back at the kitten. His body language had changed since last night. Less alert. More assured. As if he had moved from guarding to belonging. The kitten attempted a small jump onto the couch cushion. It slipped. Softly. No panic. Just surprise. Before Emma could even rise, Max stepped forward. He didn't rush. He didn't crowd. He simply stood close. The kitten leaned briefly against his leg, steadying itself. Emma felt that same warmth spread through her chest again. "You're teaching her," she whispered. Max sat down beside the couch. The kitten tried again. This time, it made it. A tiny victory. Emma clapped softly once. "That's it," she said gently. The kitten looked proud. Max's tail tapped against the floor. Satisfied. Emma leaned back in her chair. Her thoughts felt clearer now. Less uncertain. She imagined the alternative. Calling a shelter. Handing the kitten over. Watching Max search the house that evening. Looking for someone who wasn't there. The thought alone made her chest tighten. She stood slowly. Walked toward them. Knelt beside the couch. The kitten stared at her fingers. Curious. This time, when Emma reached out, the kitten didn't hesitate. It pressed its tiny head lightly into her hand. Emma closed her eyes for a second. Soft fur. Gentle warmth. Trust. Max watched closely. Not protective. Just observant. "You brought her here for a reason," Emma said quietly. Max blinked. Slow. Calm. As if the decision had never been complicated. Emma looked around her home. The warm light. The quiet corners. The space on the blanket. The empty corner near the window that suddenly didn't feel empty anymore. She exhaled slowly. "Okay," she whispered. The word carried weight. Commitment. She stood up and walked to the hallway closet. Pulled out a small pet carrier she had once used for Max. It was clean. Unused for months. She brought it into the living room and set it down. Max stood immediately. Alert. Curious. The kitten froze. Emma crouched beside them. "It's okay," she said softly. "No one's going anywhere." She opened the carrier door. Placed a folded towel inside. Then left it open. Not forcing. Just offering. Max walked over first. Sniffed it. Then stepped aside. The kitten studied it from a distance. After a long moment, it walked forward. Slowly. Carefully. It placed one paw inside. Then another. And stepped in. Emma felt something shift fully in her heart. There it was. The turning point. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just certain. Max sat beside the carrier. Looking at her. Waiting for her to say it. Emma smiled through the emotion building in her throat. "I think she's staying," she whispered. Max's tail began to wag. Not wildly. Just steady. Content. The kitten peeked out from the carrier. Tiny face framed by soft fabric. Emma reached out and gently closed the door, not to trap her, but to prepare for tomorrow. A vet visit. A checkup. A beginning. Max leaned lightly against Emma's knee. She rested her hand on his head. "You saw something I didn't," she said quietly. "And you waited until I saw it too." Max looked up at her. And in his eyes, there was no pride. No excitement. Just peace. The house didn't feel changed anymore. It felt complete. And Emma understood something beautiful in that moment. Sometimes love doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it stands quietly in the yard. And refuses to come inside alone. The next morning felt lighter. Not rushed. Not uncertain. just quietly hopeful. Sunlight spilled gently across the living room floor. The pet carrier sat near the couch, door open now. The kitten had chosen to sleep inside it. Curled tight. Safe. Max lay beside the carrier. Not touching it. Just close. Emma stood in the kitchen holding her coffee mug. Watching them. "You're serious about this," she said softly. Max looked up at her. His tail gave one calm sweep across the floor. He wasn't restless. He wasn't confused. He had settled into this new rhythm as if it had always been part of him. Emma walked over and crouched down. The kitten blinked up at her from inside the carrier. Tiny. Gray. Still a little thin, but brighter now. "You ready for a little adventure?" Emma whispered. The kitten tilted its head slightly. Max stood. He moved closer, nose gently brushing the carrier door. Checking. Reassuring. Emma noticed something small but powerful. Max wasn't attached in a playful way. He wasn't acting like a curious puppy with a new toy. He was steady. Measured. Protective in the softest sense. She reached down and clipped the carrier door shut gently. The kitten didn't protest. It simply settled deeper into the towel. Max walked beside Emma as she lifted the carrier. Each step toward the front door felt symbolic. A movement forward. Not just for the kitten, but for all of them. The drive to the vet was quiet. Emma placed the carrier carefully on the passenger seat. Max sat in the back. Watching. The sunlight flickered across the windshield as trees passed by. Emma's thoughts drifted. She thought about the first night she brought Max home. How small he had seemed. How unsure. She had promised him safety. Now, he had extended that same promise to someone else. Without hesitation. At the clinic, everything felt calm. Soft voices. Clean air. Gentle hands. The vet smiled when she saw the kitten. "Well, she's lucky someone found her," she said kindly. Emma glanced at Max. "He did," she replied quietly. The checkup was simple. The kitten was healthy. A little underweight. But strong. Young. Female. Emma felt her heart skip softly at that word. Female. The vet handed the kitten back in the carrier. "She's going to be just fine," she said warmly. Emma thanked her and stepped outside. The air felt fresh. Clear. Max waited patiently by the car. When she placed the carrier inside again, he leaned close. The kitten shifted forward, pressing lightly against the door, as if recognizing his presence. Emma smiled. "You already knew she'd be okay, didn't you?" Max blinked. Slow. Certain. On the drive home, something settled fully in her heart. There was no longer a question. No uncertainty. No maybe. Only a quiet truth. When they returned home, Emma placed the carrier back in the living room. She opened the door. The kitten stepped out slowly. Looked around. Then walked directly to Max. No hesitation this time. No uncertainty. She pressed her small body against his leg. And stayed there. Max lowered his head gently, touching noses with her. Emma felt tears gather again. But this time, they felt different. Not emotional in a fragile way, but full. Grateful. "You chose her," she said softly. "And she chose you back." Max lay down. The kitten climbed awkwardly over his front paw, then curled against his chest, like it had always belonged there. Emma sat down on the floor beside them. The house felt warm. Complete. She reached out and stroked Max's fur slowly. "You weren't being stubborn that night," she whispered. "You were being certain." Max closed his eyes. Peaceful. The kitten's breathing deepened again. Calm. Steady. Emma realized something beautiful. He hadn't just brought a kitten home. He had shown her how to listen. How to pause. How to trust the quiet signals instead of rushing past them. And in that still living room, with sunlight resting gently around them, she understood fully. Max had known from the beginning. The house felt different now. Not louder. Not busier. Just fuller. Emma stood by the kitchen window a few days later, watching soft afternoon light spill across the yard. Max lay on the rug. The kitten, now officially named Luna, curled against his side. The name had come easily. Soft. Gentle. Like her. "You like it, don't you?" Emma had whispered when she first said it aloud. Max's tail had answered for him. Luna had grown braver. Her steps were steadier. Her eyes brighter. She followed Max everywhere. Across the living room. Into the hallway. Even to the back door where it had all begun. Sometimes she would pause there, looking out at the yard. And Max would sit beside her, not letting her face it alone. Emma often thought back to that evening. The golden light. The stillness. Her calling his name. His refusal. At the time, she had almost mistaken it for disobedience. Now she understood. It had been devotion. Max hadn't refused to come inside. He had refused to leave someone behind. Emma sat down on the floor beside them. Luna climbed awkwardly into her lap, small paws pressing into her sweater. Max watched carefully. Still protective. Still steady. "You brought her home," Emma said softly. Max blinked. Slow. Content. She rested one hand on Luna's back, the other on Max's head. Two different heartbeats beneath her palms. Both calm. Both safe. And she realized something simple. Love doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it stands quietly in the fading light, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to trust it. Max had sensed something fragile in the yard that night. Something small. Something that needed warmth. And instead of running toward comfort, he stayed. He waited. He guided. Emma leaned her forehead gently against his. "Thank you," she whispered. Max's tail brushed softly against the rug. Luna shifted closer into her lap. Outside, the oak tree swayed gently in the breeze. The same tree. The same yard. But everything had changed. Because one small puppy had listened to something deeper. And because she had finally listened to him. The house no longer felt like just a home. It felt like a promise. No one gets left behind. And in the quiet warmth of that afternoon, Max closed his eyes. Certain. He had chosen well. And so had she.